diet alone is not a cure-all, right? We have medical conditions and health conditions for which diet can play a role, but I do think that food can be incredibly powerful. And I do think, people don't make the connection between what they're eating and these symptoms because there's just such a great distance between them. People discover different, I think, reactions based on different foods. But once you have that experience, it's so powerful. And no matter what somebody else says, if somebody says to me like gluten can't create breakouts, it can't do that, I'd be like, okay, but I know how it works in my body, and I'm just going to continue to use that as the foundation for the choices that I make.
Melissa, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome to the show. You're here. We made it.
I know we did. Thanks so much, Chase. I've been really excited to talk to you.
Well, I've been excited to talk to you for a long time. I shared with you before we started recording that you have impacted my life and the life of my family, I will say, greatly a while ago. You came up with this amazing idea called the Whole30, and you've done a lot since then. What year was that? That was in the mid 2008 or something like that. Is that right?
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
Okay. This podcast was beginning. It's in its infancy. That was the first time we started recording these shows at the end of 2009, right about when your book came out. You've done a lot, but if you would, for the handful of people who either are not familiar with Whole30 or you and your personal journey, can you share a little bit to sort of open the floor this morning?
Yeah, I definitely can. So I'm the Whole30 co-founder and CEO. I'm also an author. I've written 10 books, 10? Maybe 9 about the Whole30. I know, I kind of lost track. But my story started well before Whole30. I'm actually a recovering drug addict. I've got 24 years in recovery today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But my interest in health and fitness and nutrition started in my second bout with recovery. I was in rehab. I relapsed the second time around. I thought I absolutely have to do this differently. Started getting into health and fitness and nutrition. And the Whole30 was born in April 2009 as a little 2-person self-experiment. And from there, over the last 15 years, it's just really, grown into a household name and a series of books and Whole30 approved partners and millions of people having done the program and reported dramatically life-changing results.
Well, again, I personally know about Whole30 because I've done it. My wife has done it. My wife has a bunch of food sensitivities, and the Whole30, I can say, was very instrumental in helping her discover a lot of this about herself and take action. So I know that your story is tied to recovery. I need to do something different, I think is what you said to your words. But why start there? And what did it look like when you were sort of first experimenting with this?
When I got out of rehab for the second time, I knew that I had to change everything about my life if I wanted to make it stick. And I didn't think I would make it back a third time. And so I thought to myself, what would a healthy person with healthy habits do? And the first thing that popped into my head is a healthy person with healthy habits would get up every morning and go to the gym before work. I had never been to the gym. I had never exercised. I had never been a runner or a weightlifter. I didn't even play sports when I was younger. I read books and was kind of a nerd. But I thought a healthy person would go to the gym. So I started getting up at 5 o'clock every morning and going to the gym. And I didn't really know what I was doing and I didn't have any goals, but I showed up. I showed up 5 mornings a week. And from there, I thought to myself, well, what else would a healthy person with healthy habits do? And I thought, well, they would pay attention to their nutrition. And I started, cooking more whole foods and eating what I thought was healthy at the time. And it just sort of snowballed from there. When I met a group of girls at the gym, women who did not know my background and didn't know who I was and invited me to go running with them one day, I was able to see myself through their eyes. I was able to see that they saw me as Melissa, a new woman at the gym who, might be fun to run with. And they didn't see Melissa, the drug addict who had only been clean for a few weeks. And so I really think that was the key to my recovery and really launched my entire, second phase of my life.
So what I hear in there is the role that identity played. And when I think about the changes that I made in my life, and as we're thinking about the people who are listening or watching right now, there's a something about how we think about ourselves that really matters and how we show up every day, right? If we identify, I think Tony Robbins is a friend and been on the show before and talks about if you say I'm a smoker who's trying to quit, then if you identify as that, there are some challenges. So specifically with food and exercise and just healthy habits in general, what if we have a long history of, as you said, never been to the gym before, or I'm not fond of exercise, or haven't really had to watch my weight or thought about my, hey, how long am I going to live on this planet? What's my healthy heart? And we don't have this history. Is it fair to say that we can choose a new identity today, or how tied are we to our past? And I ask that through the lens of, you're very clear upfront about, like, you've been through addiction and recovery. And so I'm curious about the relationship between that process and, I am a person who eats healthier. The way that you put it, I think, was what would a healthy person do here? So help me like understand that, because to me that's fascinating when there's so much at stake there.
I stumbled into what I now know was a growth mindset. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that that's what it was called. I didn't know that there was a difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset essentially says, this is who I am. I've always been this way. I'll always be this way. I probably can't get better. It's like, I'm not good at sports, or I'm not good at math, or I'm not healthy. And I had all of this evidence to demonstrate that I was not healthy. Yeah. I had been using drugs for 5 years. I still smoked cigarettes. I was, wasting away. But a growth mindset says that you can improve these things. You can change these things, that you have the ability and you should feel empowered to make those changes. And when I came up with this idea of what would a healthy person with healthy habits do, I then immediately kind of naturally gravitated to, I am a healthy person with healthy habits. That was my mantra. And so it became my litmus test for decisions that I was going to make, decisions specifically to preserve my recovery. So coworkers would be going out for a drink after work, and I would say to myself, what would a healthy person with healthy habits do? That person would go, but would make sure your coworkers know that you did not drink. Please do not offer me a drink. And I would only stay for a little while, but I would go and I would socialize and I would get the benefit of that social interaction. So that's what I did. Would a healthy person with healthy habits maintain contacts with people who still used drugs and didn't really respect my recovery? Absolutely not. I cut those people off. So I was very lucky that I stumbled into sort of this framework that worked so well for me. And yes, all of the things that made me a very good drug addict, I did take into my exercise regimen. I over-exercised. I became too stringent with exercise. But I will say that it moderated itself very quickly because I was so focused on healthy person with healthy habits. And a healthy person would not run themselves into the ground, causing injury and overtraining. So I feel very lucky that that was kind of the framework that I stuck to. And it made all the difference. And it's kind of still the framework that I use to this day to make decisions, even though my life looks very different.
Do you feel like when you started experimenting with that lifestyle, is there power in that? Because I feel like so much of this game of making choicy or healthy choices or choosing healthy habits is a game of momentum, right? I think that's, to me, every time I think of the times where I've felt the most alive, the most connected, the most successful toward anything that I'm sort of endeavoring, whether that's health and wellness or a professional aspect, there was this aspect of momentum. And what role do you feel like that played in A, sort of habits, B, that identity piece that we've already been talking about?
I think it plays a really big role. And I think, earlier when we were talking, I said I didn't have any goals. I didn't know what I was doing, but I showed up. And I think that's another thing that I stumbled into. I did not set this unrealistic goal for myself that I couldn't maintain, for which I would beat myself up, for which I might just say, I can't do this, I quit. The only goal I had was to show up. In fact, in the beginning, the only goal I had was to wake up in the morning and put on my gym clothes. That was the only thing I asked myself to do. If at that point I didn't want to go to the gym, I didn't have to. I made the goal so small and achievable. And I would lay out all of my stuff the night before, which I know now is very big in terms of like habit conditioning, right? Pre-commitment. And I would wake up in the morning and I would put on my stuff. And at that point, I would feel so dumb standing around a dark house in the morning with all of my workout clothes on that I'd be like, okay, I'll go to the gym. But the key was just asking myself to show up. There were definitely mornings where I would get into the gym, I'd mess around for a couple minutes and say, like, I'm not feeling it today, and I would leave. But I accomplished my goal. A healthy person with healthy habits would stick to that commitment. And I think it was, making the goal small, the active pre-commitment, and just consistently showing up for myself that gave me those small wins. And it did build that inertia. People often think of inertia as like, oh, this force that's holding you back, but it's also an object that's in motion, staying in motion. And that's exactly what I did. I stayed in motion, and it just built that momentum.
I think most of the people who are listening and watching the show, they show up here because they're looking for a dose of inspiration around creativity, around building a living on a life they love. And a lot of this is career aspiration or freedom. And I feel like it's easy to look past the basics. And what I used to be one of those people, this is a confession here, that would say out loud, I would A, live the lifestyle, and then B, say out loud, I don't really need that much sleep. And that worked for a pretty long time until it didn't. If you really think about it, it's not a stretch, right? We go to sleep every night. All the creatures that walk and talk or whatever, they have to sleep. They sleep in the wilderness. We need sleep. And I kind of feel the same thing about what we put in our body, or that should we move or not. These things are so freaking obvious if we just give them the space that they desire. And yet we often choose otherwise. Is that our fault? Is that the world's fault? Is it our messaging? And I'm not actually, fault is kind of the wrong thing. I'm kind of just looking for, are we set up to succeed, or are we set up to fail? And what do we have to know in order to succeed?
Oh, that's such a big question. I mean, I do think that we are hardwired to take the easiest approach with the biggest reward, right? Our brain is always conditioned to revert back to what is easy and what is rewarding. Yeah. And you know as well as I do that the answer to so many people's questions, how do I have more energy? How do I have more sleep? How do I feel better? How do I start an exercise routine? The answer to those questions is like really boring. Eat more whole foods, get more sleep, move your body, right? It is the same prescription. And obviously there are a lot of, there are social determinants of health, and there are a lot of other factors that go into it, but it's a lot easier and definitely shinier to think that some biohacker or influencer has like the key that you've been missing. And if you just took this supplement or did this red light therapy or whatever, that you could sort of bypass the basics to feel better. And what people are doing is they're sort of like playing at the top of the pyramid without having the bottom of the pyramid really solid. And I get that it's boring, and I get that it's not sexy. And I get that it's tedious and really, really hard. Yeah. But coming back to the basics is like kind of what I do for a living.
But this is the punchline that I'm seeking. It's like, it's really all about the basics. And I love the analogy of the bottom of the pyramid. It's like, if you don't have these foundational things like sleep, movement, you're starting at such a deficit, and it ain't going to last. I mean, the base of the pyramid, there's a reason that the pyramids in Egypt don't look like a very small rock on the bottom and a bunch of big rocks up top, right? Because what's foundational is foundational, and it will always be. So let's fast forward for a second. Let's assume we're buying it. One of the things that to me is also completely obvious, yet we find so much trouble to do it, and this is where your program, I feel like, blew the doors off of all of this sort of diet culture, is that, hey, novel idea. What if we just put things that grow or that we harvest into our mouths the way they are? We can cook them, sure, but let's just eat these basic ingredients. We'll combine them in neat ways, but let's just go back to the basics. A, why do you think that was so revolutionary? And B, what did you find when you started doing just that?
So I think it's more than just let's go back to the basics, because Whole30 is not a prescriptive program long-term. We don't tell you how or what to eat for the rest of your life, but what we do, and what was so unique in 2009 and remains unique today, is that we provide a blueprint for bio-individuality. And that is, I guarantee, going to be one of the biggest health and wellness trends for 2025. It's already really big right now. But there's so much information out there about what is healthy to eat and what is unhealthy to eat. And it seems like it changes on the reg, right?
Yeah.
Don't eat too much dietary fat. Fat is good, but carbs are bad. Carbs are good, but you shouldn't eat any meat. Meat is great. Don't eat any vegetables. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so what Whole30 does is we provide you with an accessible, do-it-yourself template to determine the foods that work best for you. You get to follow this protocol, elimination and reintroduction, which has been around since the 1920s, and many doctors still consider the gold standard for identifying food sensitivities. You get to go through this program, and at the end, you know how these food groups work in your unique context. And then it doesn't matter what this influencer says or what study comes out or what the latest dietary fad is. I know for a fact, no matter how much keto is touted, I know that my body functions better on a higher carbohydrate diet. I know that even if somebody says eggplant is a superfood, my body does not digest it well. So having that power and having that knowledge and really trusting yourself to make the decisions that are right for your body puts the power back in your hands where it belongs. And it helps you kind of avoid that feeling of being buffeted by whatever direction health and wellness is going. It gives you a really solid anchor and a trust and a sense of reconnection with your body and food that I think has been missing for a very long time.
So clear, so helpful. I'm going to put a pin in that just for 1 second and say, in this community, we talk a lot about being able to be quiet enough that you can hear what you really want. There's this intuition and knowing. My most recent book had a whole chapter. It was called Never Play It Safe. There's a whole chapter on intuition and being quiet enough that you can hear what's going on. And I will say that when it's sort of as a diagnostic, when I did Whole30, I actually did 50. I did 50 days, and it was when I turned 50 not too long ago. And it felt very much like that same knowing when everything's quiet, where you strip all the noise away and something comes into your picture that isn't quiet or is disruptive. It just stands out in such a way that you're like, whoa. So this is the message for people in our community. Like, the stuff is real. It's the same medicine on a different vector. And so if you've just laid out for those who are new to this program, essentially it's an elimination and re-addition program that will help you understand your individuality, which I love. I think you're right. That's really sticky and that's not going away. Tell the people who are new to this program the details about it. So give us a little bit of the structure. And again, it's you've got a lot of books, as you mentioned. Most recent, the new Whole30, the definitive plan to transform your health habits and relationship with food. You've got a bunch of other stuff, as you said, 10 books, but this is the cornerstone. So give us the insight. What is it for people who are new?
Of course. So at its heart, Whole30 is an elimination and reintroduction program. The premise behind it is that some of the foods that you are eating may be having a sneaky impact in ways that you don't even connect. Things like your energy, your sleep, digestion, cravings, joint pain and swelling, all kinds of conditions, allergies, asthma, migraines, anxiety. These can all have an impact, or these can all be impacted by the foods that you eat, even the stuff that you may consider healthy. So on the Whole30, we eliminate food groups for 30 days that the scientific literature and our clinical experience have found are commonly problematic. These food groups are not bad. Every single one of them has health promoting properties, but if they are problematic for you, then they could be contributing negatively to how you feel and how you live your life. So for 30 days, you eliminate those food groups and you see what happens to all of those areas, your energy and sleep and digestion and cravings and aches and pains and any number of symptoms. At the end of those 30 days, you will then reintroduce those food groups back one at a time, very carefully and systematically, like a scientific experiment, and see what happens when you bring those food groups back in. What happens to your energy? What happens to your sleep? What happens to these things that perhaps got better during elimination? This allows you to identify foods that may be a trigger for you and your body. When you come out of the Whole30, you now have this personalized blueprint for the foods that work best for you, which you take to create your own lifelong, sustainable, joyful, what we call food freedom plan. That's how you eat for the rest of your life.
I will just share also for people in this community, one of the things that I did not expect to be affected by this in my world was my clarity of thinking and my creativity. Now, this is a podcast about creativity. I advocate for art and creativity and entrepreneurship and building a living and life that you love, doing the things that you love. And I could not believe the clarity that for 50, again, I did 50 days, that I had 50 days into this program. And I would say it was probably more like I started to feel it like 14 days in, just like, oh my gosh, clearer thinking, better connective. Like I was connecting things that I wouldn't otherwise connect, like this idea with that one. And I also, this is the other big shocker. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to share my experience, and then I hope you can tell me about yours, and then maybe why this is so. So clarity of thinking, no sort of brain fog. And here's the crazy one for me was less anxiety. Mm. And I don't consider myself an anxious person. I have essentially 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and I don't, I'm aware I call coffee worry juice. If you have too much, it makes you do stupid shit. And I could not believe how stable I was and how there was almost no anxiety. It tells me that there's something in my food. So I'm hoping you can help us understand how things like that, it's not just about weight, right? It's not just about how I feel in my guts and am I gaining weight or losing weight or gaining muscle or losing muscle, which I think a lot of people ascribe to this concept of choosing what you put on your body. Tell us why that's not where it ends and that it has all these other properties as well.
Yes, I should have mentioned the brain fog, the attention span, the focus, the creativity, because that is a very commonly reported trait with people doing the Whole30, especially premenopausal and menopausal women. That's like a symptom that I have experienced. And obviously, with dietary changes, improved for me dramatically as well once I kind of like tightened up my food freedom plan. I think it's so important that you call out that Whole30 is not a weight loss program. We do not exist to make people smaller. We don't offer tips for how to lose weight. We don't offer strategies for that. It's not what we do. And I think what's so unique about Whole30 is that for decades, all we have been told is that health is equated with body weight and size, that your worth and value are equated with body weight and size, and that we should only exist, especially women, to make ourselves smaller. That is the end all be all. And that is at the crux of diet culture. And that, I think, has been keeping us from seeing the benefits that could happen when we change the food we put on our plate. If you are so hyper fixated on the scale, there are so many things that you will do that will not make you healthier to make that number go down. And any potential benefits you might see, you're sort of like you've got blinders on because you're so fixed on that number. In fact, there's a rule on the Whole30 that you're not allowed to step on the scale for those 30 days. We want to take that off. If someone was a smoker and they developed a terrible cough and you said to them, you should quit smoking, they'd go, yeah, I know, you're right. They could immediately see that connection. When my mom had terrible tendinitis in her shoulder to the point where she couldn't even put a shirt on, and I said, Mom, I wonder if it's maybe gluten in your diet or dairy in the diet. I know we tend to have kind of a celiac running in the family. She could not make that connection. What does eating bread have to do with shoulder tendinitis? The thing is, food sensitivities are so unique. They are unique to each person. They are unique to the context. They can change over time, getting worse or getting better, which is why a protocol like the Whole30 to guide and lead you through. And, we don't just give you the program and say, follow it. We're telling you what to look for and when to look for it and what to expect every single day on the program. We're offering tips and advice to kind of maximize success. We're offering you a mindset checklist so that if you find yourself kind of falling back into that weight loss mentality, here's how you can remind yourself of what you are doing. And what people find is that they may have begun the program hoping to lose weight as sort of like a side goal, But what they came out with was so much more than they ever anticipated. And it spills over into every area of your life. When you were describing the benefits, the clarity, the lack of anxiety, what I heard was also an increased sense of self-efficacy. This idea that I am capable, I am in my power, I can handle things, I'm more stress resilient. People don't anticipate that a 30-day, or technically 40 if you count reintroduction, dietary regimen can improve their relationships, can make them better at their jobs, can make them a better parent, can give them the motivation to start an exercise program or go back to school or dump their toxic partner. But these are all things that I hear regularly as an effect of Whole30, which I think is my favorite part of what we do.
Well, that's part of what's so mysterious and not at the same time, right? You change what you put in your mouth and everything else changes. I think there are a lot of people listening right now who are like your mom. Wait a minute, me eating, bread from the grocery store is the thing, is why I'm not able to connect the dots in the way I used to, is the reason that I have this shoulder pain and I can't put my arm over my head. Why is that such a stretch for our culture? And why can you tell us that, no, it's true. We have the science.
Well, I think it's because food sensitivities impact different people in so many different ways. And, gluten is not problematic for everyone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put the idea in people's heads that the food groups you eliminate are bad and you should never eat them, because upon reintroduction, you may discover they work great for you, in which case I want you to keep your diet as broad and joyful as possible. And two, diet alone is not a cure-all, right? We have medical conditions and health conditions for which diet can play a role, but like my mom still needed physical therapy, right?
Sure.
But I do think that food can be incredibly powerful. And I do think, people don't make the connection between what they're eating and these symptoms because there's just such a great distance between them. There's such a great distance between the gluten that my friend Amber was eating and her rheumatoid arthritis. But when she did the Whole30 and reintroduced gluten for the first time in a month, her joints were so swollen she couldn't move them. That's a very direct correlation. Sometimes it's more subtle. When you reintroduce gluten, for me, for example, I get a little bit bloated and my skin breaks out. And I've repeated that experiment enough to know that this is true. But I still eat gluten when it's 100% worth it. And over time, I've been able to tolerate it better. People discover different, I think, reactions based on different foods. But once you have that experience, it's so powerful. And no matter what somebody else says, if somebody says to me like gluten can't create breakouts, it can't do that, I'd be like, okay, but I know how it works in my body and I'm just going to continue to use that as the foundation for the choices that I make.
Yeah. One of the things that I feel like is interesting about this process is, and what I love about you particular, and it comes through in the book, but I'm impressed with how clear you are on this topic, is this is really about picking a fight with the pharmaceutical companies or the Monsanto. And yet I know from my wife can't touch a piece of gluten. She can't get within 10 feet of it here. And in Europe, she can eat a baguette every day and have no issues. So, I have some really good anecdotal data. And yet there's not one piece of this. This is like, attack the food companies. And boy, I really want to, because I hate it and it frustrates me. And yet what I love is that this is about your personal relationship with a set of things that you decide to put in your body, and just the simple act of leaning towards the ones that work better for you and away from the ones that don't. That's all we need to know. Let's just go back to life. Sure. The world is imperfect. Some things suck over here. Some things are awesome over here. I just want to do what works for me, and I'm not out there trying to pick a fight. This is not about global food culture, and it's about what works for you. What did I get wrong with that? What color would you add? And I'm curious your response.
Yeah, I think you painted it right. Whole30's mission is to empower people to change their lives one person at a time. We're not out there to affect policy at the government level or the education level or the industry level or even the corporation level. We are helping people individually change their lives one at a time. And so, through that mission, we have been able to affect change in a variety of ways. When we launched a Whole30 approved frozen meal with Walmart, one of the pieces of the contract was that they improved the quality of the chicken that they used in the product to be more, humanely raised. And they did that within a year. And I was like, that's so cool. We can do that. We've influenced companies to take the added sugar out of their products just so they could be Whole30 approved. I love that. But people often ask me, how do you eat? And they assume that I eat Whole30 all the time. And that could not be farther from the truth. Every March or April, I take a picture with my most beloved and treasured food, which is the Cadbury cream egg that my mom sends me every year for Easter. These remind me of home. We used to have them in our Easter basket. We didn't eat a lot of chocolate when we were younger. So this was like the prize. And every year my mom sends me a 3-pack, and every year I eat one with reverence. It is delicious. It is delightful. Is that food making me healthier? I mean, if you want to look at it from a purely physiological standpoint, maybe not, but it is absolutely making my life better. It is making me feel joyful. It is making me feel connected to people in my life that I love. And there is room for every single food in your food freedom plan, right? Your Cadbury cream egg might be a breakfast cereal that you had as a kid. It might be your mom's lasagna, whatever that looks like. There is room for all foods because you get to decide what is and isn't worth it for you in that moment. And that, I think, is the most empowering aspect of the Whole30 is you are always in charge of what is and isn't worth it for you.
You created this in 2000, that 8-9 window that we've already talked about. And it has become a cultural movement, right? It's a zeitgeist. You're talking about Walmart making products that are aligned with the Whole30 because of the zeitgeist and the power of the program. And for that, hat tip. And you're also, to me, this is sort of the progression of the program. You've made it basically more accessible, supportive, effective. What are the ways that you've done that? What's changed since you launched to now?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'll say the Whole30 is available for free. And it has always been free. It will always be free. You don't need to buy anything except the food that you eat to do the program. All of the information is available on our website with tons of resources and our social media feeds. Like, that's a huge aspect of our mission, is that we make the program accessible. Over the years, we have certainly helped to make the program more convenient. So we have about 140, I think, Whole30 approved partners at this point. They make products that are compatible with the elimination phase so that when you're in the grocery store, you don't have to wonder which bacon or which ketchup or which kombucha is compatible with elimination. So these are brands like Applegate and LaCroix and Waterloo and Primal Kitchen and, Siete, brands that you know and you love that make products to make your Whole30 easier. We've, for the last 6 or 7 years now, had a partnership with Chipotle. So you can walk into any Chipotle and order through the app or through the website our Whole30 salad bowl. And we've had at least 1 or 2 Whole30 options with Chipotle for the last few years, because if you're traveling or you're on the go and you're not really sure what restaurants are available, you can always find a Chipotle and you can always get something that's hearty and delicious. We have a Whole30 meal delivery service now that sends Whole30 compatible meals straight to your door. We have Whole30 marinated chicken in many Costco stores across the country. All of these things make doing the program easier. But I will say that for every kind of convenience resource we offer, we also have a budget-friendly way to do it. So Primal Kitchen Mayo is Whole30 approved. You look for the logo, and there's a detailed tutorial on how to make mayonnaise at home. It is so quick, it's so easy, it is so cost effective, and we will help you do that too. Same thing for bone broth, same thing for meal prep, right? You can either let us do it all for you, or here's how you can do it all yourself. We want to make sure that we cover the full breadth of resources available so that the program can be accessible to as many people as possible.
One asterisk here. What I did not know until your most recent book here is that you've got actually 2 programs. There's one for omnivores and one that's plant-based, because so many people, Rich Roll is a dear friend of mine. I've been on his show. He's been on mine. You probably know Rich. Obviously plant-based and very, loud and proud about it. Not overly so, but I think that given that that is also a cultural movement on its own, was that a difficult adaptation for y'all? Like, what was the and tell us a little bit about it, because I'm thinking there are probably, well, statistically, there are like 10% of the people who are listening to this are have that question. So
Yeah. I mean, the original Whole30 program that created in 2009 does include animal products because that's how I ate. And I had played around with vegetarianism for many years in college and just discovered that eating animal protein works best in my body. But we've always tried to be welcoming and inclusive of vegans and vegetarians, even though you couldn't do the Whole30 as written. We had many coming to the community saying, I want to be part of the community. I want to use the kind of framework you've created to figure out the foods that work best for me. I kind of I want to belong. Yeah. And so in 2020, we began creating a 100% plant-based version of the program. And it took us 2 years to launch it, working with our registered dietitians and advisors to create a program that was nutritionally sound, that helped to manage blood sugar, that eliminated the most commonly problematic sources of vegetarian protein while making sure that you could still get adequate protein during the elimination phase. And so we launched it in 2022, and the new Whole30 is the first place it appears in writing with 50 recipes to support it. So that's another avenue of accessibility for people who want to explore a plant-based diet, for people who just want to eat more plant forward, or for vegans who want to take an elimination diet approach in a way that is healthy. We want them to join our community and belong as well. And now you have a discrete path with tons of resources to help you do just that.
Yeah. And I'll say, just to throw in a little added benefit, is when you lean into this community, it's not just about knowing about how this philosophy works. There's some really freaking good recipes in there, like freakishly good food in each of the different books. I know you've got I think that this last one has 100,
Yeah,
100 plant-based ones. Like, that's more than, I mean, I can't even name 100 plant-based dishes, but I just, like, I don't know who's developing those. If it's just inside you, if it's the community, it's like there's some really, really good food there. And as sort of a foodie nerd myself, like, big fan. We have the Whole30, the original book, hardback, sitting on our counter. There's like basically like 3, I'd say, kind of cookbooks, and that's usually on top because it's super good. And again, like you said, this is how my body likes. It's not even, if I just don't eat red vines and grape soda, my body is so tolerant and so nice to me. It's amazing how, the quality and the natural ingredients putting in my body, how it makes me more resilient on these other things. But just a question for the food how out there. Any insight on the recipes, and is it a community thing? Like, is it a nutritionist?
Yeah.
Like, how do you come up with those? Because there's some good stuff.
It's definitely not me. I will tell you that. I rarely create recipes, and I tend to cook very simply myself. But we have a team of recipe creatives that we've been working with for many years who understand the Whole30 program. They understand the vibe. And because Whole30 has been around for a very long time, our creators are so incredibly creative with how they put these recipes together. When you are cooking, and you're not using dairy, or you're not using added sugar, you have to find other ways to make things creamy or to make things sweet. And we have such a diverse group of creators who are taking culturally significant meals and recreating them, taking family favorites and recreating them, using ingredients that maybe you're not familiar with, but now are becoming far more commonplace. I like to think, because Whole30ers are demanding that their local grocery store stock almond flour and coconut aminos and those other ingredients. And so, our recipes are real good. And many, many people continue to use our recipes long after their Whole30 is over. And I will say, many people cook Whole30 recipes regularly who haven't even done the program, because they're whole food based, they're low in sugar, they might fit their dietary values in terms of food sensitivities, and they're just delicious and hearty.
Right now, there's people going, okay, cool, I'm interested. Tell them what's going to be the hard part.
I mean, I think when people think about the Whole30 and the hard parts, they automatically go to, it's going to be hard not to have alcohol. It's going to be hard not to have cheese. It's going to be hard not to have bread or chocolate for 30 days. Those things are hard, but I think what catches people off guard is the fact that at some point very early on in the program, you will be stressed, you will have a negative emotion, you will be triggered by a habit loop to reach for a comfort food, and you will not have it. And you will have to find another way to relieve stress, to self-soothe, to show yourself love, to relieve anxiety. And I think that's the part we help people with that so much. We offer so many resources. And again, I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the program is you come away with all of these new habits for stress mitigation and self-care. But if you're not prepared for that and you haven't thought about, well, what else could I do? It can really catch you off guard.
You just mentioned, it occurred to me, the program. You said, hey, it's free. And we're talking largely through the lens of your latest book here. Again, I'm going to share the title, The New Whole30, The Definitive Plan to Transform Your Health, Habits, and Relationship with Food. But when you're talking about being on a plan and getting support, that doesn't sound like picking up a book. So explain that part of the Whole30.
Because we've been doing Whole30 for 15 years, I've been writing about Whole30 for 15 years. There is not, and I've said this a million times, I've never had a good Whole30 idea in my life. Every single resource I've created, blog post I've written, book I've written, everything that I do comes from the community. It comes from them saying, this is a pain point. It comes from them saying, I don't understand how to do this. It comes from them saying, I have this challenge coming up that I'm not sure how to work around. And I'm like, okay, we can create something for you. So we have an enormous library of resources. And at this point, an enormous community, millions of people deep, who stick around long after their Whole30 is over, because being part of the community reinforces that growth mindset. It keeps them connected to their commitments. It allows them to give back by helping other people. New people to the Whole30. We'll get people jumping in on social media or in our, cohort community that are just taking people under their wing and teaching them what they've learned and making them feel less alone. So it isn't just a program. We don't just hand you the stuff and say, good luck. We've created this entire universe of support and accountability and guidance and tips and resources to help people succeed, because that's all I want. All I want is for people to come out of the program and say, that really did change my life.
And when you're saying the program, it's essentially you go to whole30.com and you put your email address in there. Is that fair to say? That's where the community lives. That's the process that people should go through.
Yes, we have, of course, an email list that will kind of, during group Whole30's, that will give you the content you need exactly when you need it. We have a thriving social media community. A few times a year, we run group Whole30's through our private community. So we have a community cohort that's outside of social media, where people feel really safe and they feel very comfortable sharing perhaps some of the more vulnerable aspects of their journey that they might not want to put in a public social media setting. Our cohort community is so supportive and positive. And of course, it's run and moderated by myself and Whole30 HQ. So there are a lot of places that you can sort of stay in touch and have touch bases with us and with our community.
But it all starts there, whole30.com.
Yeah, it does.
Again, as I said before we started recording, it's pretty fun to get to have this conversation with you. I was introduced to it because the neighbor across the street told me about it. And I was just like, oh man, I want to try that. And it was a long time ago. And I flirted with it, found some interesting things out again and again. When I turned 50, I was like 50 days of this stuff. And holy smokes, it's so easy to feel good. It's so easy to feel good. Simple, but not easy, I guess.
Correct.
But
yeah.
Thank you for providing a framework for so many, as you said, millions of people to feel better, to thrive, to step into there really is power, not just with how you feel on the other side of finding the things that work with your body and the things that don't, but the process of taking care of yourself is also, it's an amazing fuel. And I didn't expect those things. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm going to share the book one more time. It's called The New Whole30, The Definitive Plan to Transform Your Health, Habits, and Relationship with Food. But there's lots of books, as you said, like 9 or 10. But anything else you'd steer us toward? We talked about the site and the community, and any other places you want to point our attention?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely starts with the website and our email list, but there's a Whole30 day by day journal that you can use to kind of track every single day of the program with, guided sort of prompts and reflections. There's a book called Food Freedom Forever that you can listen to or read that kind of helps you figure out the plan for life after the Whole30. I'm still not done talking about Whole30. I still have so many ideas to provide support for the program.
Yeah.
And, but I think people can find what they're looking for at the level of support they're looking for, like across a very broad scope of our resources.
Awesome. Melissa, thank you so much for being a guest. It's so foundational what we put in our bodies. I suspected, but had no idea that there were some culprits out there, and removing them changed a lot of things for me. And as I mentioned, my family, my wife is especially sensitive. So this is a personal debt of gratitude. Thank you so much for helping shape that for us. And I know that you've got a bunch of listeners right now who are going to take you up on it. So thanks for being a guest on the show. You're always welcome here. Keep coming up with these ideas. We'll continue to have you on the show. Really appreciate it. And so I'd like to sign off now from Melissa and myself. I hope you have an amazing day. Thanks for listening.